Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst, formerly recruiting analyst, but still recruiting analyst, Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough here on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby for this evening episode, National Signing Day episode. And I mentioned the recruiting analyst part for that reason exactly. We are diving into a little bit of my expertise here at Hawkeye Beacon. Before we get started, though, make sure that you subscribe wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave that rate and review. And if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe there as well. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know who are you most excited about in this class and tell us why, because we've got our reasons, we've got our thoughts, but we want to hear from you as well. But before we get too deep into National Signing Day, Cade McNamara chose the best day to do this, I guess, and entered the portal this morning as a grad transfer. 2 years at Iowa, 2 disappointing years at Iowa. Leaves on a sour note, doesn't walk out for senior day, but either way, he is gone. Just initial thoughts, guys. I mean, we didn't dive into it much on the site. Maybe that's something for our premium subscribers in a little bit, but I mean, initial thoughts.
Yeah, on some level, you just sort of throw your hands up and say Godspeed, right? And part of this was also, not entirely unexpected. As soon as he decided not to take that senior walk, you could sort of tell that, you just sort of hope that that wasn't the end. And once it sort of became clear that the NCAA made room for extra years of eligibility just like this was going to be sort of a commonplace um approval process by the NCAA to get this one more year of eligibility. I mean, nobody thought that he would be back. This whatever you want to call this marriage, this experiment, this situation, this whatever, it has not worked out, and it really just sort of feels like the sooner both of these sides can get away from each other, the better, which is a little too bad. But at the same time, the level of vitriol coming from the Iowa fan base um, is getting to the point where it almost feels like punching down to a certain extent now. And I get that Cade McNamara, made a lot of money to be punched down at, but at the same time, it's not a great look when a quarterback who's gone through a lot is saying, "Nah, you know what? I'm not going to walk on senior day because everybody knows what the reaction is going to be." And that's not to blame this side, that side, and that's not the point of any of this, but it's still a sign of just how awry things went, and how clear it was that this was not a bridge that was going to be built back up. Ross, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said that this is just something that both sides needed is very accurate. Like there's a fresh start needed here. Like Iowa needs to, I mean, Iowa already has moved on to other quarterbacks. That's pretty clear. And, McNamara needs to go somewhere else or wherever he's going to do. Obviously, I mean, he's in the portal. He wants to play football one more year, obviously. So he needs to go do that somewhere else, hopefully somewhere it's gonna be a better fit for him. Hopefully he'll have better injury fortune there. I think he did not have the injury guys did not smile upon him at Iowa, but yeah, this was a marriage that seemed great, when it started 2 years ago, and it ended in pretty spectacularly poor fashion now, I would say.
It's like a car accident. You can't look away. You know, we'll see what transpires, right, with where he ends up. I think that was something that was worthy talking about. Probably going to be G5. Probably going to be maybe FCS. I mean, what another media member discussed with us today and said is that if you're going after what is he? He will be a seventh year senior with possibly 2 more years of eligibility that has had two major. Yeah, I know. I was going back and forth with Trevor McHugh from our site. that said that he already has 1 year and he could apply for a medical for the last 2 seasons.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. So
Does he get like a magic COVID year too or something?
I'm not sure. But you're going after a quarterback with two major surgeries, who's gone to two different schools, who's also just gotten out of concussion protocol. Probably not great. Probably
Does
not.
you
Probably not.
does Utah State want another former Iowa quarterback?
He was only coached by Brian Ferentz for 1 year, so no, they're
Yeah.
turning him down.
The nice thing is wherever he lands, he's in line for some really good NIL money from rental car companies because he'll actually be old enough to rent one himself. So like that's your angle. That's your in right there.
That it is. That it is. Now, on to talking a little bit more about the class and guys who have just decided to be here 2025. Lots to talk about here. What we're gonna do now, first of all, if you want to check out our content from today, learn a little bit more about these guys now that they have signed on the dotted line, you can do that today, iowa.rivals.com. Ton of free articles, 16 of them, one for both of the walk-ons and 15 for all the signees today. That includes a lot of our content throughout the year, what they did through their senior seasons and stuff like that. So you can check that out today. But we also have premium content that we'll preview a little bit here, regarding who we're most excited about, sleepers in the class, guys who can make an impact right away. Now, let's start with guys we're most excited about, and I'll go to you, Adam, here because you're the guy who's going to preview one of these folks that we're most excited about, these recruits, because you can read all of it, all of our thoughts, all of our things like that, on iowa.rivals.com for premium subscribers. But we'll preview it here. Adam, who's your the recruit you're most excited about?
Well, the recruit that I'm most excited about is one that also had been sort of on the fewest radars, especially coming into this football season. And that is Nathan McNeil, who is a running back slash slot receiver, who is coming out of the Northeast and who is really, in my mind, somebody who sort of typifies what makes Iowa great at recruiting. And that's because he's somebody who didn't come out and, well, didn't come out, didn't really get that recruiting attention, didn't really have that breakout performance until his senior year of high school. And, so many programs have already identified who they're going to recruit by then. So many of them, those doors are closed by then. And to some extent, that makes a lot of sense. But it also means that Iowa, with the level of attention to detail that it has for recruiting seniors, can swoop in and pick up these guys who are making these leaps in their last year of high school. And when you look at a guy like um, Nathan, his scoring started to pop up, really showed a whole lot out of the backfield too. And when you watch him play, just that level of vision, that shiftiness in the backfield, it's not giant cuts and herky jerky stuff. There's a very like fluid aspect to it. I'm just going to throw the name Marshall Falk out there. And that's not to say that he's going to be as good. That's not like, I'm not setting the bar at NFL Hall of Fame or anything like that, but you see that archetype, right? He looks like a kid who has watched Marshall Falk film, right? Not to the level of certain quarterbacks doing Pat Mahomes cosplay, but the running style is similar, the burst is similar, the versatility is similar. And it's hard not to be excited about that, especially once you start to think about what an offense like Tim Lester can install, and double, especially if there's going to be a mobile quarterback involved, right? Because all of a sudden, you got a dual threat at QB, you got a dual threat at receiver. Guys, I'm no math major, but that sounds like four threats to me. So that's to me, that seems like something that's awfully easy to be excited about. What do you guys think about young Mr. McNeil here?
Got a great highlight tape. I mean, half the highlight reel is like long touchdowns from him. Like he gets the ball, hits the hole or makes the corner, and he just keeps running until he gets to the end zone. Essentially, he gets great separation in the open field. There are no defenders that are tracking him down or, catching him from behind. But he's just, yeah, there's a lot of exciting activity in his highlights and in his game. Like Marshall Faulk is a very heady comparison and one of the best running backs of the last 25 years. But there are definitely some elements of what Faulk did in what you can see in McNeil, running and his style. And it's interesting because he's not a thumper. He's not a powerful back necessarily, like, Caleb or Jazz. So I would think at least that he's probably going to be more of a, tag team running back situation. But Iowa's had a lot of success with that too. They've done well with the bell cow. They've done well with the tag team. There's more than one way to run the ball down someone's throat. So
To pigskin the cat, if you will. And just to already correct some errata here, he's from Tampa, which is decidedly not the Northeast. Tampa, not the Northeast. Anyway,
I
Elliot.
I was walking away. I had to go check if my dog was being a domestic terrorist, and I heard you say Northeast, and I was like, did he say Northeast part of Florida at least? I was like, that's not right
Which is
either.
still
But
wrong,
right,
but
yeah. Yeah, McNeil is from Tampa. The only player from the Northeast in this class is Charles Bell, and he is a cornerback. So I don't think we're going to be talking about him much on this pod. But another guy to be, that has some intriguing traits. Of course, we've got a ton of that, ton of content on him on Iowa.rivals.com as well. But McNeil to me is like you guys have said, he's not that Caleb Johnson type where he can punch you in the mouth. He is a speed, a put a foot in the ground and break your ankles type of running back. That prototype of like a TJ Washington, kind of the gadget type of guys that can beat you with speed and with being elusive. Probably could return punts at some point in his career if he wants to, or punts and kicks. I know they prefer to use running backs for kicks as opposed to punts, but shifty, uh, Tyler Barnes said today that he was surprised Terrence Smith didn't receive more offers. Yes, I'm in the same boat, the wide receiver in this class, but honestly, I don't know how McNeil didn't get inundated at least with G5 offers. Like he's a power four running back when you watch that film. Iowa State had him on campus for a visit, didn't offer. You'd think a program like maybe Vanderbilt would at least get involved, right? Like one of those
well,
programs that's kind of quasi in the South and should probably take a shot on a guy like this.
there's all those alphabet soup teams in Florida: FAU,
Yep.
FIU, UCF, USF, etc. And his offers were Arkansas State, and who was the other one?
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island,
Ryan.
Rhodey.
Sorry, Rams, for disrespecting you, forgetting you. Yeah, like it doesn't add up when you look at his ability and everything, and there are no shortage of colleges playing football in Florida, and none of them thought he was worth a scholarship. Hey, their loss is Iowa's game. So
You know,
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the article, even if he ended up at one of those two schools, even if Iowa hadn't offered, he wasn't going to be there for long. All you had to do was look at the tape and understand how easily that's going to compute at the next level. He has Power Five potential written all over him. And it's just Iowa's luck that they got to him sort of on the ground floor as opposed to through the transfer portal, when there might be a little bit of cash involved at that point too. So yeah, just a tremendous job by Iowa's coaches by identifying and getting him in the fold to me. I think it's hard not to be excited about a prospect like that.
okay, let's move on to sleeper here with Mr. Ross Binder. Who is your sleeper in this class and why?
yeah, so I went with Drew McPherson, who is an athlete out of is it Chicago area? Is that
Yep, Loyola Academy.
Loyola Academy? Thank you. And so he's primarily played offense in high school. Started playing a little defense this year, and Iowa has recruited him as a safety to when he's here with the Hawkeyes. And when you look at him, I mean, there's a little bit of, projecting you have to do because almost all of his highlights are offensive because that's what he's played for 3 years and still what his primary role was this year. But once you get past that, it's like you don't have to work too hard to see how this guy can translate to being, in the article I called them basically a, free safety starter kit for Phil Parker. Like he's got the size. He's like 6'1", 190. He's got the, kind of a lanky, rangy frame, long limbs, gonna be good to, bad balls down in traffic. He's fast. He's got plenty of speed. He doesn't shy away from contact as an offensive player, which that's good if you're a defensive player because you're going to be the one that, laying those hits on that side of the ball. And, just the way he runs routes and the way he runs the ball as a running back, just in terms of, being patient, letting the holes develop. That just, really speaks to a very strong football IQ to me and good instincts. And I think he's going to be able to translate what he, was good at in terms of, doing plays on running things on offense. I think that's going to be extremely helpful to him on defense because he's going to know what, offensive players want to do. He's going to know how they like to run routes and everything. So to me, he's a guy that, probably take him a little bit to get up to speed in the defense, but in a year or two, I would not be remotely surprised to see him in the safety depth chart somewhere.
I like the way you put that as a Phil Parker starter kit with his physical tools. He's also Phil Parker starter kit, and I'm going to revert back to when I first talked to him after he got the Iowa offer this summer. Was he said, "I don't care what position I play, I just want to play football." And I was like, "Oh, that's a Phil Parker safety right there." And I think Phil Parker has this mold that he likes in the free safety, right? The Quinn Schultes, the Jack Kerner, the Zach Lutmer. And if McPherson grew up in small town Iowa, he would have been a Zach Lutmer. He would have been the best athlete on the team, so he put him at quarterback. He would have been the back end guy as a safety on defense. So, but he's part of an 8A two-time or back-to-back at least. I think they might be three-time back back
Yeah.
state champions in the Chicago area, Loyola Academy, with his quarterback being Ryan Fitzgerald, one of the two preferred walk-ons. And McPherson is a similar situation to Fitzgerald in that McPherson didn't have any Power Four offers prior to Iowa, just because he was playing running back and playing receiver and playing it well. I mean, he's good, but he's not Power Four receiver. He's not Power Four running back type of quality. So Phil Parker evidently saw something in him that he feels like he can mold, and I think it's good for McPherson to get a year of DB under his belt. It's not the same as Jalen Watson, who didn't allow a single catch and played a ton of corner his senior year, but it's a similar situation where you at least get him into that position and make him feel at least a little bit comfortable, and get used to moving things and doing the right things. And another positive thing for him regarding safety is that he's been around Pat Fitzgerald for a little while now, and Fitzgerald, who is Ryan's father, maybe is taking some time to watch a little film with him to work on some things with him. So physical runner, like you mentioned, Ross, so he can probably take that and translate it to the defensive side of the ball too.
Yeah, I was just actually going to ask about that connection with the Fitzgerald family because so much of what we know about that safety position in the Phil Parker defense, I think it was Jay Higgins that said that it was almost, or if not as important to calling the defense, getting everybody set as the Mike position itself. So it really sort of seems like if you're projecting a guy from offense to the defensive backfield at Iowa under Phil Parker, there has to be some sort of sense that he's going to be able to handle the leadership aspect, the sort of directing traffic aspect, as well as, actually playing the position, actually being in your spot, in your assignments at the right time. And so it really does sort of seem like that connection with Fitzgerald gives McPherson some level of, I don't want to say an edge in this or anything like that, but it seems like it ought to help him, right? Do you think that that's going to be a big factor in his development with this program?
I don't know that I would call it a big factor, but at least something positive you can look at and say, hey, that's probably something that helps. I haven't talked to Drew since he made his announcement and committed, largely because it just hasn't happened. And I wrote about his commitment, and now today wrote about his signing, and Ross was able to write about his being a sleeper, but. Yeah, that'd be something that I'd be intrigued to ask him about once he gets on campus. Now that he's signed, it's on the next to 2026. So that'll be something to ask Drew about when he gets on campus. But yeah, I think he has all the tools to figure it out, and a smart kid from what I've heard as well, and a guy that really gets along with Ryan really well. Ryan Fitzgerald, as far as I know, they're really good friends. So that's another football mind to have on your side in Ryan Fitzgerald, who plays quarterback, who is the son of Pat. So a lot of love for football in this crew of Loyola Academy guys. But we'll see how it translates over at Iowa in the upcoming years. Okay, on to impact right away in this class. And for me, this was honestly an easy one that almost came down to the wire and we wouldn't have been able to include. And that's Olante Dean, as Louisville was trying their damnedest to flip him. At least from what I've seen on Twitter, somebody said something about it this week, but I first heard about it last night, and that's what Tyler Barnes told us today as well. But I mean, it's really hard not to fall in love with his tape. I turned it on and I said, how is this kid not a four-star? That was my thinking in his versatility. He plays both sides of the ball and wants to at the next level. So we'll see if that happens. But play a variety of positions defensively, fires after the ball. He's one of those kids that, none of it, we don't want to get tackled by any of these dudes, but you watch the film and it's like, ooh, one of those, not even a thumper, but just hits you hard. And it's a controlled chaos, if you will, like an ability to hone some of that explosiveness and playmaking ability for for good. It's what a quintessential cash should be, in my opinion. And what Tyler said today is typically when you look at guys like that, you just go get safeties and then you kind of figure it out if they're going to play free, if they're going to play strong, if they're going to play cash, what it looks like when you get them there. You just get them there. That's the first thing you do. And then I mean, from watching his film, man, he's going to be fun as hell to watch.
Yeah, there aren't a whole lot of guys that fit that same exact sort of profile that Olante brings to the table, and even the names that I'm going to throw out are almost sort of lacking in terms of the level of versatility that they were sort of bringing to the table. But we're talking about guys like Christian Kirksey. All right, we're talking about guys like Ed Miles, who was the honorary captain for the Nebraska game, by the way. But we're talking about those like 6'0", 6'1". Christian Hitchens would also fall in that same boat, but we're talking about those like 6'0", 6'1", 205, 210, which is probably where Olante is going to end up once he gets to Iowa. But what they, I don't even want to call it lacking in size, but what they don't have in terms of that like huge Adonis sort of thing going on is they just hit the snot out of you. And Dean is that sort of guy. He has that right sort of aggression that you want to begin with. Like he's trying to make that impact play, but not in a reckless sort of way, not in a like, oh, we've got to coach that out of him sort of way. And Iowa is, very notorious for let's make sure that we're not or we're coaching these guys not to do certain things. You don't have that worry watching that tape of Olante Dean. So yeah, you can see why Iowa wanted him so bad. You can see why Louisville wanted him so bad. You, like you said, Eliot, you can't see why the rest of the nation didn't want him so bad because just like I sort of said about McNeil, you watch this tape and it's like, how would this not work? How would you not want to offer this guy? Like, what are you hoping to see that you're not seeing from this guy?
I'm honestly surprised Iowa took this long to get on him too. I mean, Armwood has kind of been a pipeline to Iowa. They're just a good football program year in and year out, but Iowa's had a lot of guys from Armwood. They were recruiting Gerard Pringle for a while before he blew up, and he blew up. We've got an article on him if you want to check him out. He's a Miami signee, but that was a running back there, and of course Rashad Godfrey, who is a freshman in this season and joined in the 24 class. He's a corner that's really solid. It's a really good football program. LSU offered, he considered them his dream school, but they were hot and cold. This is just a scenario where I think a lot of schools messed up, to be frank, and I think Phil Parker, who knows how long he and Kirk Ferentz are going to be around, but like Phil Parker's got to be like, you toy, like this is one of the we just talked there, we just wrote about, and I don't know if we talked about it much, but Marcello Vitti, kind of similar. They're not the exact same, but it's one of those that's an athlete, that's a DB that can do a lot of different things on a football field. And you start stacking guys like that up, and you got quite a defense to work with.
Yeah, and your VD article, Ellie, you mentioned that I think the coaches showed him some Bob Sanders film, and he was like, "Whoa," which is understandable because he was born after Bob played at Iowa. But I would show that same Bob Sanders film to Olante. I think he would appreciate it and be inspired by it, and you know want to try to follow in those footsteps because. Yeah, just a guy that I mean, there's another guy, speaking of size, Bob was even more undersized, obviously, but just a phenomenally hard-hitting, athletic, playmaking, safety type. Yeah, like you can definitely see Dean, in that mold and playing Cash, making, Cash has been a big, playmaking money making position, as it were, at Iowa, and you can definitely see him in that line down the road, and possibly not that far down the road. Yeah, and the offense and defense thing is fun to think about, fun to dream about, fun to speculate about, but also like if they wouldn't let Cooper DeJean play offense, like come on, they're not going to let any defender play offense.
Especially after he hurt himself in practice.
So,
And I considered him an
right.
impact right away for me because of one. I mean, it's really easy just to say which one's the best defensive back. There you go. It's just kind of been a trend with one Cooper, and then this year Jalen Watson. But Deshaun Lee played as a redshirt freshman. But anyway, TJ Hall played. That's another conversation. Played really early on at DB as well. But Dean
By
is
necessity.
yes, right. Dean is one of those that you say, okay, that's different, and that's the guy that you find out how to get on the field early. So that's
That's a
that's
guy
why
I
I
think I
have him.
think you might. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that's why I have him as my impact early guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think he's a guy you might see like first on special teams, and he's the guy I think fans could like start kind of taking note of like, oh, who's that dude that just blew up the return guy for Penn State? It's like, oh, that was Olante Dean. Yeah, like that
You
could
know,
be
it,
definitely be where he first like kind of starts making his name, I think.
it worked for Cone Entringer. There's no reason not to, sort of see that as a proof of concept.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, these aren't guys that we've put into these categories of, oh, most excited about, oh, whatever. But we have to talk about them. We haven't put them into that category on the podcast. Maybe we put them there in the article. You'll have to check out yourself. But few that we have to talk about before we wrap up talking about signing day. And of course, you can check out all of our content there regarding this class. Got to talk about Yosei Epinesa, the third Epinesa brother, the fourth in the lineage, if you include Epi in there, to choose the Hawkeyes. That was a recruitment that was really up in the air for a while. I honestly thought for a little bit that he was going to end up at Miami. Miami, Missouri, Penn State, Utah were all involved. Missouri was going to be a player for a little bit. I've heard a little bit about Utah as well. Just a just a it wasn't quite a Lante Dean, but it definitely had some folks nervous around the program, that they weren't going to land him. But I mean, when we're talking about Yosei, we're talking about a guy that almost looks like a bear on the football field. Like if you put a bear in pads and just put Yosei up like Epinesa across the back, but oh, that's Yosei. Um, and he just, I mean, dominated the field in just about every which way for Edwardsville over the last few years. And there's a reason he's a four-star top 120 kid for us and higher than that at other outlets. I mean, you've got the genetics, you've got the tools, you've got the mean streak. I mean, he's from what I've learned and seen a pretty mild-mannered kid, but you put pads on him and he's just a monster on the football field. And you throw in the fact that his brother has been through this system, done the two gap thing with Kelvin Bell. It's just a like a prodigy sort of situation where he's afforded these things for him to put it all together, and now it's time to put it all together. And I don't necessarily, I'm not saying that he's going to do that as a freshman. It's really, really difficult to play defensive line as a freshman at the college level. It's different when we're talking about skill positions. It's different when we're talking about maybe even quarterback when you talk about Dylan Raiola, but the size of these dudes, the strength of these dudes, the technician that you have to be to play defensive line at the top at the Division One level, at the FBS level, at the Power Four level, is something that's different. So adding Yosei is awesome. I'd have to guess that he probably redshirts as a freshman. And if he proves me wrong, I'll shut up and praise him for it. But this is another scenario where you look at this guy and you think this is probably another AJ Epinesa. This is not, man, and you don't want to make those types of comparisons, right? Just for his sake as a younger brother. But this has the potential to be a 3-year gone kind of guy, a guy that is put on the field. And Iowa didn't necessarily have that feared pass rusher this year. That's Yosei Epinesa. That will inevitably be Yosei Epinesa with his skill, with his tools, with the things that have been provided to him in terms of knowledge. And if there's a staff member that I trust to cultivate something like that, it is Kelvin Bell. So we shall see how that shakes out. Definitely a guy that we needed to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about sort of the bar that you sort of want to set for this kid. And AJ Epinesa, Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think AJ was the last defensive lineman to play as a true freshman. And so it's sort of fitting that AJ gets into this discussion too. And there's some decisions that have to be made ahead of where Epinesa is going to be coming in at defensive end. Right. And it goes beyond just, whether Ethan Hurkett wants to go to the NFL or come back for one last hurrah, whether or not he makes that decision might have some level of effect on whether or not Brian Allen wants to come back. It might have some level of effect on whether Max Llewellyn wants to come back, because those are guys that certainly flash some game breaking, certainly established themselves as Power Five caliber defensive ends. And, they may want to, sort of look at the situation and say, I've proven that I can start. And the path might not be as easy for me here, or like I've proven I can be a 12 sack a year sort of kind of guy, and it's going to be harder to do that at Iowa if Herc gets ahead of you or this or that. So you know it's a giant blinking neon undetermined sign for Iowa at this point at defensive end. And so it's plausible to me that Epinesa gets onto the field, Yosei gets onto the field as a true freshman. I don't know for sure that he's going to, reach the level of done in three like AJ did, but everything that we've heard about these guys coming out of Edwardsville is that they are pretty much neck and neck as prospects go. And there's been a few folks who are a little surprised that we have Yosei rated so far lower than AJ was at the end of his recruitment back in 2017. So I'm not saying that the bar is there for Yosei. I'm saying that the example has been set. And there's reason to believe that he could follow that example that closely. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see. And if he does redshirt, that's great for Iowa. That's better news for Iowa. But it won't surprise me if the situation is there for him to compete for snaps right away.
Lucas Van Ness played as a freshman, didn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, was he was redshirt, right? Because he had come in without having like he was the one that didn't have armpit hair or something like that.
He was
Was that?
tiny out of high school.
Yeah, yeah,
All right, maybe he was a redshirt then. But either way, I do think there's a real possibility for Yosei to play as a true freshman. Definitely be part of a rotation at defensive end. They need
yeah.
that pass rush this year was just not as consistent as it needed to be. And if he can give that, extra added juice, mixed in with Brian Allen and Max Llewellyn and Ethan Hurkett, if he's back, I definitely think that is, a way they could go with him. If he's able to hold up and everything. And based on what we've seen, I don't think there's too much doubt that that should be a real possibility. And I mean, the career AJ had at Iowa was exceptional. So that's a high bar. Yosei is gonna, blaze his own path to some extent, but anything he can do to be approaching what AJ did at Iowa would be a huge, huge boost for that defensive line and that pass rush.
I'd be more inclined to say he plays as a freshman if Ethan Hurkett moves on, which we shall see. That is still up in the air. But now we got to talk about the quarterback that I was bringing in this 25 class because you always got to talk about the quarterback in each recruiting class. Another three-star here in Jimmy Sullivan. Well, I'm expecting that he stays at quarterback past the first season. That would be my guess, first of all, with Jimmy Sullivan. Went out and saw him. This dude's a quarterback through and through. Has that charisma, has the ability to throw a deep ball, has the ability to he throws a really tight ball. That's something that sticks out to me. That's easier to tell in person. And he's got that mobility. He's not dual threat like, one of these guys that we just talked about that I wrote about in Peyton Fall Zone or Foul Zone. But he's like an Alex Padilla type. He's like closer to a like maybe a Brendan Sullivan type where he's able to run. It might, you don't want to put him out in space like a Michael Vick or anything like that, right? But Sullivan has the capacity to run. He's a guy that I could see playing at Iowa. It's different than Rezar. Rezar was an athlete that was playing quarterback, right? Jimmy Sullivan's a quarterback. So we shall see how that pans out. He's done a lot. He's been really successful at the high school level. Coming from a great program, has had some really solid receivers. He's enrolling early. I'm a Jimmy Sullivan believer, Jimmy football, and it's kind of hard not to be after getting to know him and getting to know his story a little bit.
Yeah, and you know who else is a big Jimmy football guy? Tim Lester. And the connection that Tim and Jimmy have sort of forged has gotten to the point where Lester's not even going to be out recruiting on the trail this spring because he's going to be spending that time with Sullivan in Iowa City with the rest of the quarterbacks and really getting that connection installed and getting that offense further advanced than it was this year. So that really, I think, portends well for Sullivan's future leading this program, whether that is in 2026, 27, what have you. But certainly speaks to the level of esteem that the coaches have for him, and that goes back to as long as they've been recruiting him for longer than Tim Lester's even been there in Iowa City. Like that's how long they've had him marked down as the guy. And so far, this Lester hire's been great in terms of really strengthening that bond even more. So yeah, to your point about the mobility, it seems like the ideal for him to reach is Marshall Falk once again. No, but Cade Klubnik, I think would be someone for him to watch a lot of film of. Another guy who doesn't have a Peyton Manning arm necessarily or anything like that, but can use his mobility effectively, can operate in that pocket, has a little bit of moxie, has a little bit of juice. So that sort of seems like something that if Iowa can get even 80 or 90% of a Klubnik club QB out of him in Iowa City, that's going to be a recipe for some really nice success, I think, for how this team wants to operate. Ross, how do you feel about what you've seen from Sullivan?
Hey, I'm another Jimmy football believer. I think he is our best, or going to be at least the first real quarterback to see, I think what the Tim Lester offense can look like at Iowa, like the best expression of it. He's a quarterback that Lester and Sullivan really seem to be in sync from what we've heard them say so far, even though obviously he's not yet on campus officially coming next month. But they really seem to be on the same page. I think the skill set that um, Sullivan brings is a really good fit for what Lester wants to do on offense. And, I think that's going to translate, hopefully, there's a lot of moving parts that go into a effective offense and, line play, receiver play, etc. So it's not all on Jimmy, but he does seem to be a really good fit for what Lester wants to do. And aside from all the football stuff, the thing that stood out to me is just his personality and his demeanor. And, Eliot's been able to write about him several times now, which has been great. And I think that's the thing that really comes across the most in those pieces is, he really seems like a guy that is going to be easy for teammates to get behind and to believe in. And, I think he wears leadership very easily and effectively. And that hasn't always been the case, I would say, with quarterbacks at Iowa. But he really seems like he's going to be a really good fit in that role.
I say I'm a believer in Jimmy football for a few reasons, and I think you guys have had mentioned it. I think it's the marriage of him and Tim Lester too. I mean, you actually have a quarterbacks coach, and they both appear to be those optimistic guys that love talking ball and that will do anything and everything for the team to win and talking a little bit more about that dual threat ability, with a little bit of juice. When I say he's not a guy you get in space, he's not one that you necessarily are like, okay, we got to have Jimmy run, 40 times, not 40, but 20 times this game, 15 times this game, 10 times this game. But he is a quarterback that if you're running an RPO and he pulls it and there's nothing but green grass in front of him, that's going to be a touchdown. He's going to be able to get there. So I like what he's able to do, and he's able to put the ball where it needs to go. He doesn't turn the ball over much, if at all. Got sacked a little bit too much for my liking when I went out and watched him, but there's a lot of things that fall into that. Also hit a couple deep balls that were like, oh, I didn't know Jimmy could throw the ball that deep. So there are just things that add up that make you feel good about it, where you maybe weren't able to say that with a few other quarterbacks that Iowa has signed. So I don't know if cautiously optimistic is the right word to put it. I'm honest. I would probably just put it optimistic. I'm not like the Iowa fan base was when they brought in Cade McNamara out of the portal or anything like that. But I'm optimistic about Jimmy Sullivan, and I like what he's done on the football field so far. Now on to another legacy recruit that we've got to talk about. I went out to his signing ceremony today where he had already signed this morning and got his paper in, but that's just kind of a thing that happens at this level is guys will, if they don't do it in the morning with everybody else, they'll do it as like a party thing at the end of the day, which was what happened. He had cookies and stuff like that. LeVar was there. So that was cool to be a part of, but Mason Woods here, a guy that did a lot for his high school football team at Iowa City West, split out wide, caught a lot of touchdown passes from Jack Wallace, that's for sure, who's headed to Minnesota Mankato D2, and what Mason looks like to me, but also apparently to the staff, though he is like the third tight end in this class effectively between Thomas Meyer, who would be one we talk about, but we got to get out of here. 4-star tight end, Hawkeye through and through, guy that his parents ended up, or they were season ticket holders for basically his whole life. So a little tidbit there for you on Thomas Meyer, and then Eli Johnson is the other tight end in this class, but Mason is, and the vision is for him to be kind of a hybrid tight end slash wide receiver. Tyler Barnes called him Noah Fant-ish today, and I think that is what you're looking at with one of those receiver tight end kind of guys that aren't going to block a ton. He wasn't really down in the 3-point stance much, if at all, at Iowa City West. Not that I saw, more often than not, just on the outside. And fast for the high school level, probably not fast enough to play receiver full blown at the power four level. That's why tight end really makes a little bit more sense. But an athlete, and if he ends up playing defense, I that would surprise me a little bit, but that it would surprise me flat out. But it could happen. I wouldn't completely rule it out just because of the talent that's there with him at that tight end position in his class and the class ahead of him. And potentially in 2026 too. We'll see what shakes out there. Max Sutter, a guy that's shown some serious interest in Iowa, though he's also got offers from Alabama and Georgia and Michigan. So we shall see. But neither here nor there. Mason Woods, I think a really nice add to this class. A guy that grew up saying, "I'm not going to go to Iowa. I don't want to go to Iowa," and ends up at Iowa and will be coached by his father and by Abdul Hodge and John Budmeyer. And I think you don't pass up on getting an athlete like this, and that's why partially why Iowa continued to recruit him, even though they got the two tight ends they wanted in Thomas Meyer and Eli Johnson.
Now, when you call him Noah Fant-esque, would you call him a specialist? Uh, just kidding. It's a little Kirk Ferentz
Too
joke.
soon.
It's a little Kirk Ferentz joke, Elliot. Sorry.
Okay, I did. Yeah, don't get the reference. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that was before your time, youngin.
Yeah. But in all honesty, I do think that is a really strong comparison for him, in terms of past tight ends at Iowa. Noah Fant was an unbelievable athlete, and he, parlayed that into, some really tremendous plays from the tight end position at Iowa. And you can definitely see Woods doing the same. Is he going to be the blocker that, Luke Lachey is or Sam Laporta? I would say probably not. That doesn't quite look like him. But, there are many different types of tight ends and many different ways to help the Iowa offense. And I can definitely see Woods, fitting in and being a really valuable weapon, especially in the passing game.
Yeah, and especially because you don't really need him to be a 4-3 or 4-2 sort of runner, although the staff really does like his speed, but you don't need him to be that sort of game breaking in order to be effective in this sort of offense. Because when you're trying to run that RPO, when you're trying to create these sort of mismatches, all you need him to do is, in all likelihood, be faster than a linebacker and get that right matchup on him, get the get the wrong guy on him from the defense's perspective, and hit him on a slant and let some of that natural athleticism take over. And all he has to do is beat the guy who's unfortunate enough to have that assignment, or if it's somebody who is fast enough, use that size and sort of body him out of the play and make him make that tackle on somebody who's a whole lot larger than him. So yeah, the term that Tyler used was a new toy for Tim Lester to play with, and you can tell that an offensive coordinator is going to love trying to create those mismatches, is going to love that chess match of, all right, here's where we get I almost called him Noah Fant. Here's where we get Mason Woods one-on-one with a guy who's 185 pounds and like we recruited and we know he doesn't tackle. Or like, here's how we get him against a guy who's defensive coordinator thinks he's a lot faster at defensive end than he is. Like he made one play in space 6 weeks ago and they think that he can cover in the flat now. All right, well, here's Mason Woods. Good luck. And so you start to see that vision of how do we create these mismatches? How do we get this guy in space? And how do you not be tantalized by a skill set like that? And it got to the point where they were telling the tight ends, like, hey, look, we wanted two, but if we can get this guy too, he's in. And that is that sort of athleticism you just don't say no to. And so, yeah, it will be fascinating to see how they actually go about this.
All right, plenty more recruits in this class to talk about, and you can do that with us at iowa.rivals.com. If you're not a subscriber yet, you can join us there, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. before we get out of here, what we did last year, and like I said before we started podcasting today, was that I'm immersed in this stuff. So, Adam, Ross, did you have anything else that you had questions about that, or maybe our listeners would want to listen in on, have thoughts on, something like that?
Not a ton of questions, I think. I think the thing that stood out to me was how relatively drama-free a signing day was for Iowa today. I mean, and that's not uncommon. Iowa, especially the last decade or so, I think is really focused on getting as much of its class done as possible, in the previous winter and spring, essentially, and not having too many guys even to grab during the fall. And certainly, Iowa's not really after those guys that are the signing day decisions. There was an exception today with Dean making it official with Iowa today, which was nice. But I don't know. What did you think about the relative lack of drama, I guess, in this class?
Well, this was my first year with drama. So like last year there was literally zero. So Dean, the last minute flip flop, flip flop, flip flop, whatever that was the closest thing to drama that I've experienced. I think Iowa prefers to not have that drama. Caden Proctor is a very different situation than what Iowa is used to. Any sort of drama that might have happened in this class, other than Dean, was gone and done with in the decommitments with Scott Starzik, Nick Brooks, and Cam Herron, who Starzik's at Arkansas, Cam Herron at Notre Dame, Nick Brooks at Texas. So any sort of, I guess, quote unquote drama that could or would have happened with this class didn't. The closest thing to it would be Olante Dean, who was potentially going to flip to Louisville there towards the end, but ultimately signed, committed and signed on the same day, and picked Iowa.
Yeah, and it sounds like mom was as happy as anybody about that situation if we're reading between the lines of what some certain staffers have said there. So in terms of, I guess, sort of one last question here. Another big linebacker class for Iowa after taking three last year, and three guys who also have just a ton of potential, that the coaches like a lot. I guess in your talking with these recruits, what do they say when they are one part of a sort of larger position group, but they've also got a large position group right ahead of them? Like, was that something that Burke Goucher, Carson Cooney, or anybody sort of mentioned about that aspect of coming in, or is it just I'm just trying to get on campus?
Well, Burke and Carson were the only signees that were linebackers in this class. Of course, Dean would be a quasi linebacker safety if he ends up being a cash, right? But it's not really something that comes up. What does come up frequently is with guys like that, if it does come up, is just the fact that that's a reason that they've gone to Iowa, right? Like it's a loaded group, and it's a loaded group for a reason. The belief in Seth Wallace, one, their ability to recruit. And Jay Higgins talked about the culture in that linebacker room is different. Not necessarily different than the rest of the team, but it's just different than what college football is generally. That's why Jay Higgins stuck around. That's why Jay Higgins is playing even when he's hurt towards the end of his last year of college football. So that seems to be the continuity there, I guess, between these guys who have committed and chosen Iowa, and with Cooney and Goucher, they're both enrolling early. Goucher's a guy that will probably play the Will. Cooney's a guy that'll probably play the Mike in this class, and they were looking at possibly going and getting McGuire Richmond, who is Mason Richmond's brother, but ultimately he committed to Kansas State. So that one's not he's not in this class, obviously, and they got their two four-stars in this class instead. But man, these two back-to-back years of this linebacker class, and then Ben Keeter in the class above them, just loaded, and it speaks to Seth Wallace's ability to develop and his ability to recruit as well. So that will wrap it up for us here on this episode of HawkCast. We appreciate you tuning in. Before you go, make sure you subscribe, whether you're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, here on YouTube. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know who is your favorite in this class. Who's your favorite prospect? Who are you most excited about? All that good stuff down there in the comments. And Ross looks like he has something.
Oh, I just wanted to correct myself for the record that the the defensive lineman we were talking about, he did redshirt.
Lucas Van Ness.
Lucas Van Ness. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I found that too, but
Yes.
we got
Yes.
distracted. So, but yeah, there we go. And again, if you're listening,
Take that, comments.
if you're listening
Don't
on
yell
Apple,
at me.
listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, leave that rate and review and subscribe because we don't want you to miss an episode. You don't want to miss an episode of HawkCast here with us. Again, if you want to join the conversation surrounding this class, surrounding Iowa football, the transfer portal, women's basketball, men's basketball, and so much more on our premium page, you can do that, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. That gets you premium content, and you get to be part of our conversations on the premium boards, which just dropped a little bit of intel regarding the transfer portal. So you can check that out there. For now, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder, and we will see you next time.